Good day, everyone. I am Arabella Grace and a Madulara. My topic is about modern and postmodern periods, which is from 19,000 to 1980. So, today we are diving into the new American voices of the 20th century, which is a period that saw a massive shift from traditional storytelling to radical experimental forms, which is between 19,000 and 1980. So, the modernist and postmodernist era. So, American literature from 19,000 to 1980 was shaped by war, disillusionment, identity, and formal experimentation. So, modernists search for meaning in a broken world, which is postmodernists questioned whether meaning could ever be fixed at all. So when this means that modernism was a serious, tragic effort to reconnect a stable truth through experimental art after the world was shattered by World War One. Later, postmodernism rejected the idea of fixed meaning entirely, so instead using irony and metafiction to celebrate the world as a fragmented, subjective game. This shift moved American literature from mourning the loss of order to celebrating the chaos, trading a desperate search for a grand narrative for a playful exploration of perspectives. So to lessen our time, I will just directly explain what does these terms mean. So when we say fragmentation, it is instead of a clear beginning, middle, and end, modern stories are often told in shards. So by jumping across different time periods or switching between multiple characters' perspectives without warning. So writers mirrored the feeling of a world that no longer felt whole, or predictable after the chaos of the Great War. So the next one is stream of consciousness. When we say stream of consciousness, this is the technique attempts to map the inner landscape of the human mind. So rather than using tidy sentences and logical transitions, writers like William Faulkner or James Joyce used long, rambling, or interrupted sentences to mimic the raw, unfiltered way thoughts actually drift and collide in our heads. So the next one is iceberg theory, which is it is from Hemingway's minimalism, where the deepest meaning stays beneath the surface. So this technique is the art of omission. So Hemingway believed that a story's power comes from what is not said. So he stripped away descriptions and emotions, so leaving only 10% of the story on the surface or the tip, kung unsa tong like tips of iceberg. So while forcing the reader to feel the heavy 90%, which is the meaning lurking underneath the simple prose. So the next one is the lost generation. So it was discussed by our other members. So this wasn't a technique as much as a mood shared by writers like F. Scott Fitzgerald. So having survived the war, these creators felt lost and disillusioned. So their work often explores the hollow nature of the American dream, showing that behind the roaring 20s exists a glamour. There was a deep sense of emptiness and spiritual exhaustion. So if Scott Fitzgerald, so he is the chronicle of excess. So Fitzgerald gave a face to roaring 20s. So his work focuses on the glamour and decay. So of the American dream, showing that how wealth and status can mask a deep hollow sadness. So in the Great Gatsby, he uses lush, poetic language to capture the lost feeling of a generation that had everything but felt like they had nothing. So the next one is Ernest Hemingway. So he is the master of restraint. So Hemingway was the polar opposite in style. He used stoicism and brevity to show the trauma of war. So, by stripping away flowery adjectives and focusing on simple rhythmic sentences, he created the iceberg theory, where the most painful emotions are never stated directly but are felt deeply between the lines. So the next one is T.S. Eliot, the voice of disillusionment. So Eliot's work, specifically The Wasteland, serves as the ultimate map of the modernist psyche. He used a collage of different languages, historical references, and fragmented images to show a world that feels spiritually empty and culturally broken. So after World War One, for Eliot, modern life was a desert, and his poetry captured the uncertainty of trying to find a drop of meaning in a dry land. So the next one is Langston Hughes, the architect of jazz poetry as a leader of the Harlem Renaissance. So Hughes did something revolutionary. So he put the rhythm of the streets into high art. So by blending the soulful, improvisational patterns of jazz and blues with formal poetry, he gave a powerful voice to the Black American experience. So his work moved away from European traditions to celebrate a unique, resilient, and vibrantly modern American identity. So now we are going to delve into the postmodernist era. So it is from 1945 to 1980. So postmodernism emerged after World War II and the atomic bomb, where modernists searched for meaning in chaos. So postmodernists often embraced chaos itself. They questioned authority, destabilized narrative, and treated truth as something provisional, contested, and often constructed. So the next one is the postmodernist techniques. So metafiction, this is a storytelling about storytelling. So instead of trying to make the reader believe the story is real, the author openly admits this is a book. So characters might talk to the reader or the narrator might discuss the process of writing the chapter you are currently reading. So it breaks the fourth wall to show that reality itself can be a scripted performance. So the next one is irony and black humor. So postmodernists deal with heavy, tragic subjects like nuclear war, bureaucracy, or death by making them absurd. So instead of mourning the tragedy like a modernist would, they use gallows humor to highlight how ridiculous and senseless the modern world can be. So it's a way of surviving chaos by laughing at it. So the next one is pastiche. So think of this as a literary collage. So postmodernists don't believe in pure art. So they intentionally collide highbrow literature with lowbrow pop culture, like comic books, detective movies, or advertisements. So by imitating and mixing different styles and genres, they create a remix that challenges the idea of what important art should look like. So the next one is hyperreality. So this is the feeling that the copy has become more real than the original. So in a world full of TV, social media, and advertising, the line between the actual world and the media made simulation disappears. So we often react to the image of an event more than the event itself. So leading to a world where the real is just another thing we see on a screen. So we have major postmodern figures. So the first one is Kurt Vonnegut. So he is the master of the absurd. So he used science fiction and nonlinear time to process the trauma of World War II. So in Slaughterhouse-Five, his protagonist becomes unstuck in time. So moving between the past, present, and a fictional alien planet. So this fragmentation isn't just a gimmick. So it's a postmodernist way of showing that trauma doesn't happen in a straight line. So it breaks our sense of reality and forces us to use black humor to survive the unthinkable. So the next one is Toni Morrison. So the architect of memory. Morrison brought a lyrical and fragmented narrative to the exploration of the black experience. So in The Bluest Eye, she doesn't just tell a story, she deconstructs the master narrative of American beauty and identity. So by jumping between perspectives and using poetic nonlinear prose, she captures how history and systematic pressure fracture the individual soul, demanding that the reader remember the parts of history that traditional literature often ignored. So we have another literary direction, which is the first one is Thomas Pynchon. So he was called the architect of paranoia. So Pynchon is the king of the intricate paranoid plot. His work reflects the Cold War atmosphere where everything felt like a conspiracy and technology felt like it was spinning out of control. So by using dense, sprawling narratives, he showed that in a postmodern world, truth is often buried under layers of bureaucracy, science, and secret history. So for Pynchon, the chaos isn't just a style, it's the reality of living in a high pressure, high tech society. So the next one is Maya Angelou. So uh, while Pynchon looked outward of systems, Angelou looked inward with honesty and lyricism. And I know why the caged bird sings. She moved the memoir into a new space by using the tools of fiction, vivid imagery, rhythmic prose, and a nonlinear emotional journey. She showed that a personal story could have the same weight and authority as a great American novel. She proved that reclaiming one's identity through storytelling is a revolutionary act. So now we are going to analyze um, the story by 1984 by George Orwell. So we are just going to analyze it through toasty analysis. So um, uh, it is part of my report since um, the publication of this story was published around the modern and postmodern periods. So, toasty analysis of 1984 by George Orwell. So, a close reading of Orwell's dystopia through prediction, symbolism, tone, transformation, and theme. So, the novel begins like a warning and ends like a disappearance. So, from the toasty analysis, the first T means title. So, the title of our story is 1984. So the next one is the O, which means own words. So at first glance, 1984 feels like a science fiction story about a high-tech future. So like it is like somewhat a prediction gani and on what will happen in our future. So this specific year creates the sense of a countdown or prophecy, and the world seems stripped down, controlled, and almost mathematical. So I expect flying cars, advanced computers, and a space age setting, but the mood is colder than futuristic spectacle. So it feels clinical, severe, and deeply unsettling. So it looks like that. We're gonna is somewhat a very high tech world. So the next letter is A, which means analyze poetic devices. So the first um, device that we can found on the story of 1984 is symbolism, which means which refers to the glass paperweight stands for the fragile beauty of the past, while Big Brother becomes the face of the state itself. So the next one is metaphor. So if you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. Condenses a Persian into one unforgettable image. So the next one is paradox. So slogans like war is peace reveal how language can be twisted until logic collapses. So the next one is shift. So the turning point arrives in room 101, where Winston changes from the last man into a mindless servant of the party. So his final resistance collapses there, and the internal voice that defined him is extinguished. So what remains is not victory or resolution, but submission, proof that power has reached even in the mind. So the next one is the tone. So the tone of our story is somewhat paranoid because suffocating and clinical. So Orwell's plain style is Mayer's 1987 notes mirrors the absence of color, warmth, and joy in Winston's world. So the simplicity of the language makes the terror feel even sharper. Nothing is decorative, nothing is safe, and every sentence feels to watch. So it's very unique. And so when we go back, when we and ano here the title again, when we go back to the title, so we can understand that 1984 story is no longer just a year. It becomes a state of mind. So the title marks the moment when the new American voice of freedom is completely erased by total surveillance. So overall turns a date into a warning. When power controls memory, identity, and language, time itself will become political. So the last one is the theme. So the theme of the story is the terrifying power of a system to override objective reality. So also the deepest loss is not only political but personal. So the individual self is erased by the collective force of the state. Truth becomes unstable and becomes disposable. So that's it. Thank you for listening and God bless.